My name is Clara, and I grew up in a town that smelled of salt and secrets. Port Blossom, Maine, is the kind of place you see on postcards, with its rugged coastline, a white-spired church, and a harbor full of fishing boats that bob like sleeping gulls. Our house, a sprawling old captain's home with a widow's walk, faced the Atlantic, and on clear nights, the moon would lay a silver path across the water, a road to somewhere else. But inside those walls, the air was thick with a different kind of inheritance, a legacy that clung to the air like the damp sea mist. My parents, pillars of the Port Blossom community, believed in tradition above all else. My father, a successful real estate developer, was a man who built his world on handshakes and shared history. My mother, elegant and poised, shared the historical society and knew the lineage of every founding family. Their most sacred tradition, however, was not recorded in any town ledger. They called it the legacy. From the moment my older brother, Leo, and I were old enough to sit at the dinner table without a booster seat, we were taught that the Abbott family had a special constitution, a resilience passed down through generations, proven by our ability to appreciate the finer spirits. It began innocently enough, a drop of brandy on a sugar cube to ward off a winter chill, a sip of champagne on New Year's Eve. But by the time I was 10, Friday nights had become legacy night. Dad would bring out a bottle of dark, spiced rum, the kind sailors used to drink, he'd say with a proud smile. Mom would set out small, heavy-bottomed glasses. It was a lesson, they explained, in moderation, in culture, in being a grown-up. Leo, 2 years my senior, took to it with an unnerving ease. He thrived on our father's praise, on the boisterous laughter that filled the room when he could take a sip without flinching. He was a natural, a true Abbott. I was not. The burn of the rum felt like a punishment, a hot coil unwinding in my chest. I'd try to hide my grimace, to swallow without coughing, but my body always betrayed me. "You think too much, Clara," my mother would say, her voice gentle but edged with disappointment. "You have to learn to let go." The more Leo let go, the more he was rewarded. By 14, he was Dad's favorite companion for late-night talks on the porch, a glass of whiskey in each of their hands. His grades started to slip, but Dad just laughed it off. "The boy's got charisma, not calculus," he'd say. "That's what matters in the real world." Leo got a vintage convertible for his 16th birthday, tickets to any concert he wanted. Meanwhile, I became the quiet disappointment. My straight A's, my captaincy of the track team, my part-time job at the local bookstore to save for college, these were seen not as achievements, but as evidence of my uptight nature. I was judging them, they said, by choosing a different path. I tried to reason with them once, when I was 15. I'd found Leo asleep on the bathroom floor, his face pale and clammy. When I told my parents, my father put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Your brother is learning his limits, Clara. It's part of growing up. All the great men in our family had to do it." He made it sound like a noble trial, a rite of passage. After that, I learned to keep my concerns to myself. But a seed of fear had been planted, a fear that grew every time I saw the slight tremor in Leo's hands at breakfast, a tremor Dad would cure with a splash of beer in his orange juice. To survive, to find some sliver of peace in that house, I became a performer. I learned to laugh at their drunken stories, to hold a glass with practiced ease, to make a show of sipping while I'd carefully tip the contents into a thirsty potted fern when no one was looking. It was a lonely, exhausting performance, but it worked. The tension in my mother's shoulders would ease. My father would clap me on the back and call me his girl. I was finally, tentatively, part of the family. The saddest part was that this charade felt more like love than anything I'd ever known. My escape came in the form of an acceptance letter to a small liberal arts college tucked away in the Green Mountains of Vermont. The moment I drove onto that campus, breathing in the crisp, pine-scented air, I felt like I could finally exhale. My randomly assigned roommate, Maya, was a vibrant, kind-hearted soul who was 2 years into her recovery from alcohol addiction. Through her, I discovered a world I never knew existed, a world of late-night talks fueled by tea, of dancing with joyful abandon without a drop of liquor, of hiking to a mountain summit just to watch the sunrise. I started going with her to a campus sober support group. Sitting in that circle of mismatched chairs, listening to stories of struggle and resilience, I began to understand. What happened in my house wasn't tradition. It was a cycle of intergenerational trauma, dysfunction dressed up in the finery of family lore. For the first time, my mind felt clear. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for years began to dissipate. I started trail running, pushing my body up steep, rocky paths, feeling a strength and power that was entirely my own. I was building myself, piece by piece, into someone I could respect. In the winter of my sophomore year, flush with a naive confidence, I made a reckless decision. I decided to go home for Christmas. I imagined it as a turning point. I would arrive, clear-headed and strong, and I would be the one to finally break the cycle. I painstakingly gathered photos of my new life, of me and my friends laughing on a mountaintop, of our sober holiday party. I bought expensive non-alcoholic champagne and craft sodas, hoping to show them that celebration didn't have to be steeped in alcohol. A small, hopeful part of me, the part that still craved the family on the postcard, fantasized about a quiet Christmas, a real connection, a new beginning. The fantasy shattered the moment I walked through the door. Before I could even set down my bags, my father pressed a cold beer into my hand. "There's our world traveler. Heard college kids know how to party." I smiled gently and set the bottle on the hall table. "It's good to see you, Dad. Actually, I'm not drinking. I'm training for a half marathon in the spring." The warmth vanished from his face. My mother, emerging from the kitchen, saw the untouched beer. Her expression darkened. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with a familiar disappointment. "So you're one of those now. Too good for us." The evening spiraled downward from there. My carefully chosen gifts were met with polite, but cool, thanks. My stories about Vermont were met with silence. They wanted the performer, the girl who would laugh and pretend, and I was no longer willing to play the part. When I tried to excuse myself to bed early, they followed me, my father holding a bottle of tequila and 2 shot glasses. "You're not going to ruin Christmas with this sanctimonious act, Clara," Mom snarled, the gentle mask completely gone. What happened next is a scene that plays in my mind in fractured, slow-motion horror. I tried to close my bedroom door, but Dad wedged his foot in it. He was smiling, but it was a terrifying, mirthless smile. He pinned my arms to my sides, his strength surprising me. "Just a little holiday cheer," he slurred. Mom unscrewed the cap of the tequila bottle. "We're going to help you loosen up." I clenched my jaw, shaking my head, tears streaming down my face. The smell of the agave was suffocating. "Please don't." My father, annoyed by my resistance, pinched my nose. My lungs burned. Instinct took over, and I gasped for air through my mouth. In that instant, Mom tilted the bottle. The tequila seared my throat, a trail of fire down to my stomach. My body convulsed, and I threw it all up, right there on the antique Persian rug. They just laughed. "She's out of practice," Dad said, as if it were a joke. They tried to force more into me, but I fought, screaming and thrashing. Through the doorway, I saw Leo. He was leaning against the frame, his skin sallow under the hallway light, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He watched, a silent, swaying spectator, too lost in his own fog to intervene. I knew I couldn't win physically. So I went limp, letting my eyes roll back, faking unconsciousness. It worked. After a few more prods, they left me, stumbling back downstairs. I lay there for a moment, my throat raw, the stench of vomit and tequila filling the room. Then, with trembling hands, I crawled to the door, cracked it open, and used my phone to record their voices drifting up the stairs. "Broke her back in, just like an old mare." Dad was laughing. "She needed it," Mom agreed. "That college is filling her head with nonsense." Huddled in the darkness of my childhood closet, I dialed 911. As the distant wail of sirens grew closer, slicing through the quiet coastal night, I watched through the crack in the closet door. I saw my parents freeze mid-laugh. Panic replaced amusement on their faces. "Did you hear that?" Mom's voice was suddenly sharp, the slur almost gone. Dad stumbled to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain. The reflection of red and blue lights danced across his face. "Someone called the cops." Their heads swiveled in unison toward my room. I held my breath, my phone clutched in a sweaty palm. My throat burned, and the wet patch on my shirt felt cold and disgusting. "Check on her," Dad ordered. "See if she's really out." "You check," Mom shot back. "This is your fault. You pushed too hard." "My fault? You're the one who poured it down her throat." Their argument bought me precious seconds. I slipped out of the closet, arranged myself on the bed, closed my eyes, and forced my breathing to be shallow and even. Heavy footsteps approached. A hand gripped my shoulder and shook me hard. "She's out cold," Dad announced, his voice full of relief. The doorbell rang, followed by a loud, authoritative knocking. "Police. Open up." I heard my mother scrambling, spraying air freshener frantically, the sound of her kicking the broken shards of a glass under the sofa. "Leo, get down here and act normal." I heard my brother's clumsy descent, bumping against the walls. Through slitted eyelids, I saw him grip the banister, his whole body swaying. Even in the dim light, his skin had a disturbing yellow tint. "Stand up straight," Dad hissed, slapping him on the back. "Remember, we were just having a quiet family evening." The knocking grew more insistent. "Police, we need you to open this door." Dad pasted on his charming, real estate developer smile and opened the door. Two officers stood on our porch, a man and a woman, their hands resting near their belts. "Evening, officers. Is there a problem?" "We received a 911 call from this address, sir," said the taller male officer, his eyes scanning the scene behind my father. "Report of a disturbance." "Must be a prank call," Dad said smoothly. "We're just having a quiet family night." That was my cue. I stumbled out of my room, making sure the vomit stain on my college sweatshirt was visible. I held my throat, my expression pained. The officer's attention snapped to me instantly. "Miss, are you all right?" the female officer, Martinez, asked, taking a step forward. Before I could answer, my mother rushed to my side, wrapping a suffocating arm around me. "Oh, officers, I am so sorry," she said, her voice laden with faux concern. "Our daughter, she's been having some mental health challenges since she went away to school. She gets these episodes." "She's been unstable for months," Dad added, his tone dripping with practiced worry. "We've been trying to get her help, but she's very resistant." I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a raw croak. "They forced alcohol." My mother's grip tightened on my shoulder, a silent warning. "See? She makes up these elaborate stories. We found her drinking alone in her room. We think she was having some kind of breakdown." The officers exchanged a look. The male officer addressed me directly. "Miss, we're going to need to speak with everyone separately. Can you come outside with Officer Martinez?" As I moved toward the door, I saw Leo wavering in the background, his loyalty flickering in his bloodshot eyes like a dying bulb. He looked from me to our parents, then back to me, his silence a confession he couldn't bring himself to speak. Outside on the porch, the cold air was a relief. Officer Martinez's gaze immediately fell on my soiled sweatshirt. "Tell me what happened tonight." With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone. "I have a video." They held me down. They poured tequila down my throat. Behind us, through the window, I could see my mother gesturing wildly, pointing at me as my father spoke to the other officer. Our neighbor, Dr. Sharma, peered through her blinds, her silhouette a silent witness to the chaos. "Let me see the video," Officer Martinez said gently. I played the recording. The audio was clear enough. You could hear their slurred laughter, their words about breaking me back in. Martinez's expression hardened. She called to her partner, who came outside to watch it. My mother's shriek pierced the night. "That's taken out of context. She edits things. Where's your warrant?" The male officer's attention shifted to Leo, who was now slumped against the wall inside, his skin waxy and yellow. "Sir, is your son all right? He appears to be in medical distress." "He has the flu," Mom said quickly. "A bad flu." "Kyle, Leo, tell them you're fine," Dad commanded. Leo opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at me, his face a mask of misery and conflict. "We need paramedics here," Officer Martinez said into her radio. "Possible alcohol poisoning and a medical emergency." "This is ridiculous." Dad's voice rose. I play golf with the sheriff every Sunday. This is a simple family misunderstanding. My daughter is bitter. She's always had this holier-than-thou attitude. While we waited, my phone began to buzz. My mother had already started her campaign. Texts from aunts, uncles, cousins. Traitor. How could you do this to your parents? Your mom says you're having a breakdown. Get help. The paramedics arrived and one of them examined my throat. Chemical burns, he told the officers, after I explained what happened. Consistent with forced alcohol consumption. She needs to go to the hospital. She did it to herself for attention, my mother insisted from the doorway. A grimace of pain crossed Leo's face as his hand went to his side. It was a small movement, but the paramedics noticed. Under the bright porch lights, his condition was undeniable. How long have you had abdominal pain, son? A paramedic asked him directly. Leo looked at my father, then mumbled, a few weeks. It's nothing, Dad said, trying to steer the conversation. You know, Sheriff Patterson and I were just talking about how these family disagreements get blown out of proportion. Sir, Officer Martinez said, her jaw tight. We're going to need everyone to come down to the station to give formal statements. I'm calling our lawyer, Mom announced, her phone already in hand. This is harassment. Our daughter is ill, and you're enabling her delusions. As the officers collected the broken bottle and took photos, my phone buzzed again. It was a group text from my mother to the entire extended family. Please pray for us. Clara is having another episode and called the police. We are heartbroken. She needs mental help but refuses. The replies were immediate and brutal, a cascade of condemnation from the people who were supposed to love me. At the station, we were separated. I sat in a small, sterile room, my throat on fire, as Officer Martinez took my statement. Through the window, I saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot. Uncle Marcus, my mother's brother, their lawyer and lifelong drinking buddy, burst in reeking of whiskey. My clients will not be answering any questions, he announced before producing a folder. My clients have been concerned about their daughter's mental state for years. Here's documentation. My heart sank. He spread out papers from when I was 16, from a time I'd refused to drink at a family party and they had taken me to a doctor, claiming I was exhibiting paranoid delusions about alcohol. They had been building this case against me for years. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo. Why couldn't you just pretend for one more night? The betrayal was a physical blow, sharper than the burn in my throat. When Officer Martinez returned, her expression was guarded. The video is concerning, but without your brother's cooperation, it's your word against theirs. They're claiming you did this to yourself for attention. I thought of all the times my parents had boasted about their connections, their friendships with judges and politicians, all cemented over drinks. They hadn't just created a family tradition, they had built a fortress around it. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Martinez asked. The word safe felt like a foreign language. Home had never been truly safe, and now they had made sure nowhere else would be either. My phone lit up with a Facebook notification. My mother had made a public post, a beautifully crafted piece of fiction about her mentally ill, addicted daughter who had turned on her loving, supportive parents. The comments poured in, a symphony of sympathy for them and condemnation for me. They were turning me into the villain of my own story, and they were doing it with terrifying speed and skill. The fluorescent lights of the station hummed, casting a sickly glare on the unfolding disaster of my life. My mother's Facebook post had become a local phenomenon. People from their country club, from the historical society, even my old high school teachers were chiming in with prayers for my parents and armchair diagnoses for me. Then a different kind of message appeared. It was from Sal, the old bartender at the Salty Dog, my parents' favorite tavern. Leo's been coming to the AA meetings at the church basement. 3 months now. They don't know. Before I could even process the shock of it, Uncle Marcus swept back into the room. He slapped down a thick stack of financial records. They pay your tuition, your rent, your car insurance, your phone bill, he said, his voice smooth as poison. You are entirely dependent on them. One signature, and it all goes away. Is that what you want? My phone buzzed again. It was Maya, my roommate. Your mom just sent me a friend request. She's asking all these weird questions about your mental health. What do I do? They were attacking on all fronts, trying to isolate me, to dismantle my support system. A commotion at the door drew my attention. We need to transport the brother to the hospital, a paramedic said. His condition is deteriorating. I saw them loading Leo onto a gurney. His skin had a greenish cast, and he was clutching his side, his face contorted in pain. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting second I saw raw, undiluted terror. His liver is failing, I blurted out to Martinez. Please, tell the doctors to run a full hepatic panel. Uncle Marcus scoffed. Now she's a doctor. This is exactly the kind of delusional behavior we've been dealing with. My phone rang. It was my father. Are you happy now? He asked, his voice cold as ice. Your brother is in the hospital because of the stress you've caused. If anything happens to him, it's on you. He's sick because you've been poisoning him his whole life. We gave him a legacy, he retorted. Something to belong to. You're the one who rejected us. Then my mother's voice came on the line. Tell her about the diary, honey. My blood ran cold. The diary I'd kept when I was 15, full of teenage angst, frustration, and fantasies of escape. We kept it, my father said, his voice laced with triumph. In case we ever needed to show people who you really are. The line went dead. I felt the last of my strength drain away. They had thought of everything. You're free to go, Officer Martinez said, her voice tinged with pity. But I strongly advise you avoid contact with your parents. In fact, Uncle Marcus smirked, I'll be advising my clients to seek a restraining order. For their safety, of course. Outside, the December air felt like needles in my lungs. I got in my car and just sat there, the engine off. My phone chimed with a notification from my bank. My savings account, which had held over $3,000 I'd painstakingly saved from my bookstore job, now held a balance of $27.14. They had drained everything. I drove to the hospital in a daze. After a long argument with a nurse, I finally found Leo's room. His new girlfriend, Amelia, was there, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. I'd only met her once. You shouldn't be here, she said, her eyes red from crying. Your parents said you had a breakdown. Amelia, please. You know that's not true. Do I? She asked, her voice trembling. You called the police on them, Clara. On Christmas. Leo's been throwing up blood from the stress. He's throwing up blood because his liver is failing, I said, my voice rising in desperation. Sal told me Leo's been going to AA meetings. Amelia's face went white. That's not, he wouldn't. He has. For 3 months. He's been trying to get sober. Ask him. Get out, she whispered, her voice firm. Get out before I call security. As I left, I snapped a photo of his chart hanging on the door. The notes were clear. Elevated liver enzymes, query cirrhosis, recommend further testing. Nothing about stress-induced gastritis. In the cold, sterile light of the parking garage, I finally broke. The sobs were violent, wrenching things that tore through me, leaving me empty and shaking. My family, my finances, my brother's life, everything was disintegrating. My phone rang. It was my old friend, Jessica, from high school. Her own family had a similar, if less theatrical, drinking problem. I heard what happened, she said. I believe you, Clara. But listen, you need to be careful. My dad called your dad after he saw the post. I heard him mention something about coordinating stories and protecting family traditions. They were circling the wagons, not just my family, but their whole tribe. I drove to the only sanctuary I could think of, a 24-hour gym. I ran on the treadmill until my legs burned and my lungs screamed, trying to outrun the truth. My phone buzzed with an email from Maya. She'd forwarded a 3-page, single-spaced letter from my mother, a masterpiece of fiction detailing my fabricated history of mental illness, my supposed heavy drinking at school, and my involvement in a cult-like sobriety group that encouraged severing family ties. It was so skillfully woven with threads of truth that it was terrifyingly believable. I spent an hour crafting a reply, attaching photos, articles about gaslighting, anything I could think of to prove my sanity. But as I hit send, a wave of hopelessness washed over me. The next morning, I woke up stiff and cold in my car. My phone was a minefield of missed calls and angry texts. But one message stood out. It was from Dr. Sharma, my parents' neighbor. I saw what happened last night. If you need a medical professional to verify your injuries, I'm willing to help. Your parents have been a danger to themselves and others for years. A tiny flicker of hope ignited in my chest. We met at a coffee shop. She looked exhausted. I've been debating getting involved, she admitted. But last month, I saw them drag Leo into the house after he collapsed in the driveway. They refused my help. I couldn't stay silent anymore. She showed me her phone. She had security camera footage. Years of it. My parents driving drunk, Leo being carried inside, my father threatening a delivery driver. She had kept a meticulous log. The problem, she said, her expression grim, is that your parents have connections everywhere. They've spent decades building this town in their image. Just then, a text from an unknown number came through. This is Sal. Can't use my reg phone. Your parents are at the bar now. Meeting with the Pattersons, the Williamses, the Garcias. Heard them say unified front and protecting our way of life. Be careful. Dr. Sharma read it over my shoulder. They're not just protecting themselves, she said softly. You've threatened the entire culture. My phone rang. It was Leo. You need to stop, he rasped. Mom and Dad explained everything. I'm fine. You're just confused. If you really cared, you'd apologize. The line went dead. Even dying, he was still caught in their web. The psychological chains are often the strongest, Dr. Sharma said, placing a hand on my arm. What do I do? I whispered. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. You survive, she said simply. You document everything. And you wait for the truth to come out. But I was running out of time. That evening, at the cheap motel I could barely afford, there was a knock on the door. 2 police officers. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. Your parents have filed for an emergency psychiatric hold. They're concerned you're a danger to yourself and others. The floor dropped out from under me. They had paperwork, signed by a judge who, I later learned, was in my father's weekly poker game. I was handcuffed and driven to a psychiatric facility an hour away. During intake, the more I tried to explain the truth, the more paranoid and delusional I sounded. My marathon training was obsessive behavior. My sober support group was a cult. My concern for Leo was a fixation. I was placed in a locked room, my phone confiscated, completely cut off from the world. My parents had won. They had silenced me. The 72-hour hold felt like an eternity. I was surrounded by the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the ramblings of genuinely ill people, forced into group therapy sessions where I had to play along to seem cooperative. On the 3rd day, the psychiatrist, a young doctor named Al-Jamil, called me into his office. His expression was different. Confused. We spoke with a Dr. Sharma, he said slowly. She provided interesting footage. We also received calls from your college roommate, your academic advisor, and your employer. Their version of events differs significantly from your family's. Relief, pure and overwhelming, washed over me. So you believe me? I believe this situation is far more complex than it first appeared, he said carefully. However, your parents are still your medical proxy. They're insisting on continued treatment. He was discharging me, but warned me that I was on my own. As a social worker drove me back to town, she handed me my phone. It lit up with 3 days of messages. Most were cruel, but scattered among them were lifelines. A text from Jessica, telling me to stay strong. A message from my track coach, saving my spot on the team. And one from Amelia. I'm so sorry. You were right. Leo told me everything. He needs you. I ran into the hospital, my heart pounding. Leo was in the ICU. He was awake, but barely, hooked up to a constellation of machines. His skin was the color of old parchment. You came, he whispered. Of course I came. Tears leaked from his eyes. They brought me a flask yesterday. Said it would make me feel better. I couldn't. I never can say no. His voice broke. Clara, I'm dying. The doctors won't say it, but I feel it. My body is shutting down. We'll get you on the transplant list, I insisted. They won't consent, he whispered. They say abbots don't take parts from other people. It's weak. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it stole my breath. They would rather watch their son die than admit their legacy was a poison. A nurse entered, her face grim as she checked his vitals. "Time is running out," she said softly after she left. Leo turned to me, his grip surprisingly strong. "In my apartment. Under the bed. There's a box. Everything is in there. Recordings, journals, medical records. Promise me, if something happens, you'll use it. Don't let them do this to anyone else." I promised, my heart shattering. As I left the hospital, his apartment key clutched in my hand, I knew this was no longer just about saving Leo. It was about ending a war that had been raging in our family for generations. The key felt cold in my hand as I let myself into Leo's apartment. It was a monument to his despair, littered with empty bottles and takeout containers. Under the bed, I found the box. It was a treasure chest of tragedy. Journals detailing his secret attempts at sobriety, each entry ending in failure. Hidden medical records showing his liver deteriorating over months. And a USB drive labeled insurance. I plugged it into his laptop. It was filled with videos he'd secretly recorded. My parents pouring vodka into his morning orange juice. My father threatening to disown him if he embarrassed the family by going to rehab. The final video showed my father smashing Leo's 1-month sobriety chip with a hammer while my mother cheered. My phone buzzed. It was Amelia. "Get back here. They're here." I raced back to the hospital to find my parents and Uncle Marcus in Leo's room, shoving papers in his face. A power of attorney. "Stop." I burst in, holding up the USB drive. "Don't you dare sign anything, Leo. I have everything." My mother lunged for the drive, but Amelia stepped between us. "I called her," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I couldn't let you do this." Security arrived, but so did Dr. Sharma, who bluffed her way in, claiming to be his physician and clearing the room. Alone, we showed the on-call psychiatrist and a patient advocate the contents of the drive. "This is unequivocal abuse," the psychiatrist said. "We are contacting Adult Protective Services." But my parents returned, this time with a judge from the poker game, armed with a court order reaffirming their medical authority. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Your Honor, are you aware of my father's campaign contributions? Did you enjoy the vintage port he served at your daughter's wedding?" The judge's face went red. Uncle Marcus grabbed for my phone, but it was too late. I'd already started a live stream. The situation imploded. The hospital administrator, looking panicked, called for a review. And then, the door opened. Jessica's father walked in. Then Mrs. Patterson. Then Mr. Garcia. One by one, parents from the other legacy families came forward, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve. The dam had broken. "My son is in rehab," Mrs. Patterson said, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't say anything. We all had a pact. The room erupted into a chaos of accusations and denials. In the midst of it all, Leo's monitor started to shriek. His numbers were crashing. "He needs the transplant list now," Dr. Sharma yelled. "We're out of time." "I consent," I said. "You have no authority," Uncle Marcus shouted. "Actually, she does," Amelia said, stepping forward with a piece of paper. "Leo and I were married by the hospital chaplain yesterday. I am his wife, and I'm designating his sister as our medical proxy." My mother let out a sound of pure, animalistic rage. As security escorted my parents away, their faces were masks of disbelief. Their control, their entire world, had crumbled in a matter of minutes. The hours that followed were a blur. Leo was put at the top of the transplant list. A match was found. He was wheeled into surgery, squeezing my hand one last time. "If I don't make it," he started. "You will," I whispered back. 8 hours later, the surgeon emerged, exhausted but smiling. The transplant was a success. "He's stable." The fight was far from over. The following months were a gauntlet of legal battles. My parents, released from a brief psychiatric hold, sued everyone. But the tide had turned. The district attorney, a woman who didn't play golf with my father, filed criminal charges. Other children came forward. The postcard town of Port Blossom was forced to look at the ugly truth behind its charming facade. My parents were convicted on multiple counts. The sentence was only 2 years in prison, but their real punishment was the irrevocable destruction of their reputation, the kingdom they had built on a foundation of liquor and lies. I went back to Vermont in the fall, working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Leo, after graduating from a 90-day rehab program, started working at a recovery center. A few months later, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Sophia, a daughter who would only know her father as a kind, gentle, sober man. That spring, I ran my half marathon. My time was slow, my body still weary, but as I crossed the finish line, I felt a profound sense of peace. We never spoke to our parents again. They moved away after their release, starting over in a new town with a new story, painting themselves as the victims of ungrateful, troubled children. 2 years after that horrific Christmas, on a quiet December evening, I received a text from Leo. It was a photo of him holding Sophia on his shoulders at her 2nd birthday party. He was laughing, his eyes clear and full of life. Below the photo, a simple message: "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't." I stared at the image for a long time. We had lost so much: our home, our family, our inheritance. But we had saved him. We had saved her. The generational curse had ended with us. I typed back a single word: worth it. And it was. Every agonizing moment, every sleepless night, every broken relationship. The price was everything. And I would pay it again.